African American civil rights movements, feminism, and anti-war movements. What do they all have in common? They saw a change they wanted and they worked towards it. In this presentation, I will delve into each movement and its characteristics and ultimately deem one the most successful. Feminism has been prevalent for ages, as women have always been labeled as inferior. Some of the key influences were Alice Paul, Betty Friedman, and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, although they were from different time periods. The primary goals of the feminist movement were to challenge and end workplace inequality, denial and access to better jobs, and close the salary gap. Feminists also fought hard to achieve choice, whether it be regarding abortion or clothing decisions. Feminism has been prevalent for ages. There have been many notable outcomes of the women's suffrage movements, such as the establishment of the New York Married Women's Act, the 19th Amendment, the Equal Pay Act, the Fair Labor Standards Act, and Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. Despite the change feminists made, gender inequality still exists in the form of unclosed wage gaps, over-sexualization of women, rape, and sexual harassment. Feminists worked hard in order to bring some form of change and equality to the female group. However, complete equality may never be achieved, as for thousands of years women have been perceived as homemakers and inferior, and it may take thousands of years to undo such mentality. African American grassroots movement. Some of the key influences were MLK, Malcolm X, President Lyndon Johnson, Bob Moses, and Stokely Carmichael. Of course, there are many more prominent activists, but these are just a few that contributed to pivotal change in the United States. The goals of the African American grassroots movement were to bring about equality for African Americans through abolishment of desegregation and participate politically. Above all, the ultimate goal was to achieve racial equality and cease prejudice. The grassroots African American civil rights movement was a fight for equality and independence from the oppression of white superiors. For centuries, African Americans have been subject to white rule and mandate, from the Dred Scott ruling to the Plessy versus Ferguson. Through civil rights movements and protests, revolutionary acts and legislation were passed, such as the 24th Amendment, Kennedy's Executive Order 10925, and the passage of the Civil Rights Act. The dedication of protest groups such as NAACP, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee brought about monumental societal change. Discrimination may still be evident today, but the majority of citizens are equipped with opportunity and resources not available previously. The anti-war movement. Key protest groups were the SDS, or the Students for a Democratic Society, the Student Peace Union, the National Committee for a Sane Nuclear Policy, and the Free Speech Movement. All groups played a large role in creating and moving the anti-war protests in America. The majority of protesters were young individuals, typically in college, and demanded everyone to make love, not war. The goal of the anti-war movement was to unite Americans and promote peace, love, and harmony, instead of hate and American intervention on foreign land. Protesters wanted government officials to focus on bettering the United States, instead of bombarding in foreign affairs and losing American lives for a cause that would benefit them in no way. The anti-war movement was fueled by Americans' hatred of war, having just encountered 2 world wars previous. Tensions were high, and loved ones were shipped off to unknown places for an unknown cause. Promotion and love and harmony instead of guns and weaponry drove the anti-war movement through the creation of multiple groups, such as the National Mobilization Committee to End War in Vietnam, American Civil Liberties Union, and protests on school campuses. However, these movements did not have significant influence on American intervention in Vietnam, as Johnson increased attention and power in the area, despite citizen sentiment. It is not until it's too late and Nixon has invaded Cambodia, then too many American lives are lost, that Nixon retracts American soldiers under the Paris peace talks. There is no proper way to measure success of a movement. There is no unit to develop a definite conclusion. However, I believe that between the anti-war movement, the African American civil rights movement, and the feminist movement, The only way to measure the most successful of the three would be through growth. Not growth of acts or population, but of the individuals affected. Starting at the beginning, have rights been gained, lost, well-being increased, decreased? Between the three groups, I believe that the African American civil rights movement was the most successful in terms of betterment of the individual. When African Americans arrived in the United States years and years ago, they were none more than property, stripped of any human rights or characteristics. Centuries later, we now have African Americans in colleges, in elite coalitions, and even as our president. Women have also endured oppression, but not to the extent of African Americans. In conclusion, the grassroots civil rights movements had the most impact on the targeted group of individuals, as they experienced the most growth and lifestyle change.